man. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me. Appreciate
Thank
it,
you,
man. It's
man.
going to be fun.
So, Rob, first and foremost, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot of things going on, so I'm grateful you're able to sit down with me today and share your story, spread your message with me, the audience, and I'm excited to learn from you, man. So thank you very much for doing the show.
No problem at all. Appreciate being here, and appreciate you taking the time to have me on. I was actually looking at your some of your socials there, and there's upcoming people, and I'm like, I see my name, I see another guy's name, and then I'm like, Mr. World Peace, and I'm like, I hope I don't go on after that guy. That's a freaking high bar.
That's a high energy individual, man.
Yeah. So I didn't know who he was, and then Jamie was showing. I guess he came to our house and then started seeing some of his YouTube stuff.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh, so, awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully it's before Mr. World.
Yeah,
Peace.
we can work something out. That was a really good conversation, right? I don't want to spend too much time on that, but there's some cool things that will really help me understand a bit more of the subjects we talk about today. Cool. So it's cool to see patterns come about. But what I want to dive into first, to give people a bit of context about you, take us through kind of your leaving high school transition period time, and then I want to know as well, I want to pair that question with if what you're doing now is what you thought you were doing gonna do that. Take us through that time frame.
Yeah,
and we can go through it.
So leaving high school, that was quite some time ago, mid to late 90s. And, probably a lot like most kids back in the 90s, kind of tail end of Generation X, man. It was a little bit of a, kind of like there was the whole grunge era and, what am I going to do with my life? And, the existential crisis of reality bites and all that stuff, right? So, high school wasn't probably really the most engaged student, so it was, got through the grade 12 at the time, got through the grade 13, and then I think that was the last year where they had it. They might have had it 1 year after that, and then really kind of was looking at like, what am I going to do here? It was the pathway of can go to try to get into a university and do whatever at the time, or try to figure something out. So I actually took a year and a bit off and ended up working at Pure Later Courier.
Nice.
At the time, my uncle was the senior vice president of Pure Later International.
Sick.
And so I called him up and said, any chance you can get me a job? He says, well, yeah, of
course.
I can get you a job,
Say
right?
No
so I ended up getting through there and started on the graveyard shift, emptying transport trailers.
Nice.
Right? So you have a 53-foot trailer full of packages and a conveyor belt, and then two people in that trailer emptying them out for like 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So
you're one of those guys.
I was one of those
Amazing.
guys. Yeah.
Amazing.
So then got into that. I was doing that, and I was having a blast, man. Everybody that I worked there with was fantastic. Still to this day, still see people 30 years later,
Amazing.
and fist bumping them.
Hell yeah.
Because they're doing their routes, or you see them around, right? So then ended up going to Cambrian College for their firefighter program.
Nice.
Did that. It was the first year they had actually had the practical portion. Before that, there was only the theory piece. So, but we had to go down to Oshawa to Durham College in Whitby for the second half of the year. So we had, these 20-some kids all from Sudbury that ended up finishing the first part, and then all got shipped down as a group down to Durham College in Whitby. So
brutal.
Had a great time down there, and got an apartment and did all of that stuff. Graduated, did really well, and then basically the way the hiring process works for fire departments in Ontario, it's like each one is separate at that time, and if you want to work in Sudbury, you apply in Sudbury, work in Toronto, blah 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 blah. Right. So then it was like, well, shit. Now what do I do? Because done this firefighting course, living in Southern Ontario, having a blast with 15, 18 of your buddies, and then all of a sudden reality sets in, and you got to get a job, right?
Yeah.
So
bites us all.
yeah. So the day after we graduated, a friend of mine, Matty Lawson, ended up getting a job at a company called Expertech, which is a subsidiary of Bell at the time. Basically, Bell lineman work, right?
Real
so
sick, yeah.
climbing poles, pulling cable, putting fiber optics in. And that was at the height of the Nortel days. So you're pulling 10 feet of cable, making 20 grand, 25 grand for the company, right?
You're busy.
So busy. So he got a job, called me the next day and said, Rob, I got a job here. There's a job here if you want it. Yeah. So went in, met with the manager, got hired that day, and then almost exclusively that same group of 18, 20 guys, I'd say 14 of them all got hired at this same company. So we've all just kind of transitioned from college to now into Expertech. And then we spent a year, I spent about a year and a half, climbing poles in backyards in Toronto,
pulling cable
and putting in telephone poles and, in every different area in Toronto, all over the place, right? So did that, and at the time kept applying to different departments and ended up getting hired here in Sudbury in September of 2000, and then I've been working here ever since. So I'm starting my 25th year here in September.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have a question for you that's always kind of been on my mind, but it doesn't seem like it's at the forefront of things. Do you work at a law firm? What's
so
I'm curious.
Yeah, so that's a bit further into the story. I do work for a group that does disability law down in they're based out of Hamilton, but they do disability law countrywide. Nice. Matt Lalonde is the lead on that. Great guy, and they've taken a position where they're seeing a deficiency in people being able to get secured benefits and LTD and all these things as a result of their benefit providers. So if you have a benefit provider at work, you get hurt, and you're a unionized employee, there's a whole navigation that has to go through collective agreement, and it's like a 4-step process to determine whether or not it can be arbitrated, which is in front of an arbitrator. It has to go to court, and so on and so forth. So Matt's a Sudbury boy. Matt Lalonde's a Sudbury boy, and him and I have known each other for a long time. So their philosophy was, let's put a union focus on this and see what's going on, because disability law issues is something that unions all across Canada are dealing with, and there's not a lot of resources for unions to do it anymore. They used to deal with it internally. Right. And it's getting harder and harder for them to do so, right? So
now they can't. They almost source it out to them.
Resource it, yeah. So that's the plan on nice. Expanding it and stuff. And it's good to have somebody with some labor relations experience, right? So you have a carpenter or a firefighter or police officer or whatever, trying to relay the labor side of the issues to the lawyers that specialize in the disability law, because there's all kinds of different facets of law.
Yeah, it's crazy.
To have that kind of intermediary that has an understanding of A and B, because back when I was doing firefighter union stuff, I used to do advocacy work for interest arbitration, collective agreements. I would present cases in front of boards and stuff like that, right? So it's
exciting.
Well, it's something.
It's a lot of hoops.
It's a lot of hoops. Yeah,
a lot of red tape.
Yeah.
Jeez, why'd you first get into that stuff? What was the desire to fight the man with that type of stuff?
I don't know.
Or just represent them, I should say. It might be a better way of framing it.
Yeah, it was always just kind of a thing where coming into the fire service, and the perception versus reality thing of labor relations and stuff, and what you think is happening before you walk in the door and what's actually happening is a lot different, right? So a lot of the same issues that labor groups have with their employer, we would have with our employer. And for the most part, don't get me wrong, City of Sudbury is a great employer. There's obviously differences at times, but
it's gonna happen with everything.
Yeah, but for the most part, they're great people. But sometimes you disagree on stuff, and there's a process, which is kind of navigating a collective agreement and then going to rights arbitration if there's an interpretation of the collective agreement issue, or interest arbitration if you need a new collective agreement. And because we don't have the ability to strike, we go to what's called binding arbitration, which is in front of a board, and you have a panel. It used to have a panel, now it's a sole guy, but you have to go argue your case, right? And then it becomes binding. Mm-hmm. So for me, I always enjoyed in high school and getting into, you know, Pure Later, because it was the Teamsters at the time. I always enjoyed the legal side of things, right? Like we'd have an issue of whether or not you can dye your hair purple at Lockerbie when I went to high school. Well, we're going to fight this, and we're going to argue this with the... You know, which now you look back on, it's freaking
it's like
stupid
everybody's hair is purple
right?
now,
Or
but
at the time, I think it was a nose ring. Somebody had a nose ring, and we're arguing whether or not you could have a nose ring. But that was like 35 years ago, 36 years
You'll
ago.
never have one, but you'll speak on behalf of those people.
100%.
I love it.
Right? 100%. But it's also, it's kind of that,
amazing.
you know, you get, when you get really good at it or into it, it's a game like anything else. Like it's not a game, but it's a competition like anything else, right? So you got to know your facts, you got to be able to debate, you have to be able to think on your feet, you have to have enough confidence in yourself to know that if you're referencing a certain piece of legislation or you're referencing a certain clause or case law or what have you, that you don't have to have it memorized, but you better know
where to find it.
Say it better be there, because that's your reputation, right?
Right.
So I became pretty good at that, and started kind of, you know, making a name for myself at the provincial firefighters level. And at the time, there was a whole issue going on with the Liberal government and the teachers with Bill 115. They were basically trying to beat down the teachers, and they were violating their rights, their charter rights. There wasn't a question about it. But because politics and labor intersect, and politicians and labor leaders intersect, there's some times where people may not want to say something for fear of causing an issue somewhere else with a politician, right? And at the time, there was all kinds of labor groups speaking up in support of the teachers, and we were, I wouldn't say we weren't, but we weren't necessarily.
You couldn't voice it.
Couldn't voice it quite as much.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, so me being, you know, probably 5 minutes on the block, right? You know, and then having, I have a mentor of mine, great guy. His name's Henry Watson. He was a 35-year firefighter in Hamilton. For 30 of those years, he was the local president in Hamilton.
He's seen some things.
Hamilton, Sudbury, Windsor those are very similar places, very similar personalities, you know.
Amazing.
Hardcore Steel Town, Nickel Town, you know, Auto Town. They're built different, right?
100%.
So, you know, he would have a position that might be different than someone else in the GTA for the most part. And basically we got to this seminar where somebody was going to have this discussion on whether or not we were supporting the teachers, and just got to the microphone, and at the time, you know, our MPP was Rick Bartolucci. He's an amazing guy. He's a great guy, but we saw things, we didn't see things eye to eye on this, right? So we were talking at the time, and, you know, basically went to the microphone and proceeded to, you know, give this like 10-minute diatribe on how the Liberal government is violating the constitutional rights of these teachers. And then it was like, well, who the fuck, who is this kid?
It's your episode.
Who is this kid to come in and start basically talking, you know? So half of it was like, who's this guy? The other half of it was like, who's this guy?
You always have to like build up a credibility in the moment.
A little bit,
tough,
challenging. So from there, it became more of an opportunity to, you know, voice concerns for the members here locally, voice concerns for members here provincially, and that's when I got into working for the IFF as an advocate. The IFF is the International Association of Firefighters, so working for them as an advocate, which is presenting cases in arbitration hearings for collective agreements. And the way firefighters do it, they're unique, is the employers will hire a lawyer to present their case. The firefighters will hire a trained firefighter to present their case, because the thought process is nobody knows firefighter issues better than firefighters.
Makes sense, yeah.
So let's teach them to be quasi-lawyers as opposed to teaching a lawyer to be a firefighter.
So you put that hat on.
Exactly,
yeah,
right?
Okay.
So started doing that
sense.
and worked on cases, in different locals in Ontario, and we were successful in there. And then decided to go the political route, and our provincial organization is called the Ontario Professional Firefighters Association.
Right.
And ran for what would be their number 2 job, which at the time was called an executive vice president.
Mm-hmm.
Ran against a seasoned individual out of Toronto. Toronto has 3,000 members, right? So they're the largest in Canada. Hands down, they're 30% ish of the entire population of firefighters in Toronto or in Ontario.
Yeah.
So,
Quite a few.
the chances of being successful were it wasn't about that. It was about getting out, making a statement, and pushing the, not, I don't want to say the agenda, but just making it identified that, hey, there's a whole new other generation of leaders coming up.
Shift the narrative a little bit.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because a lot of the guys have been there for a long time, right? Some of our leaders at the IFF, at the international level, have been retired for 20, 25 years, 30 years, or whatever.
Things have changed.
Sure. Right? Not to discredit anything they've done, but firefighting from when I started to now is completely different.
Man, we were just talking about that with men from 40 years ago to now. Everything changes, right?
Everything changes.
Everything changes,
right? Yeah. So ran that election, lost that election, and it was fine. We just came back and kept doing the same thing I was doing, and 2 years later, decided to go again, but at this time there was no opponent. So basically it was looking like I was going to get acclaimed, right? Because we had another guy that was the president out of Oakville, great guy. And right on the eve of all of this stuff, the organization ended up getting involved in a legal matter relating to WSIB claims and fraud, where firefighters that were passing away from cancer were alleging to be defrauded by people that were essentially working for the organization.
Come on.
So there was a lot of tension, a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
And I get a phone call. I still remember it to this day. I was sitting down on Van Horn Station, and I get a phone call from the president who said, I'm not going to run again in 2016. And I said, oh, that's too bad, because he had some health issues and some stuff that he had to take care of, and some serious things, and you got to take care of yourself first, man. This 100%. Job, both jobs, firefighting and the union business, it is a big stressor on you, right? So I said, oh shit, who's taking your place? Mm-hmm. And he said, you are. I said, hold on a second here.
Hold the phone.
At the time, I think I was, early 30s, whatever it was, 36 or whatever, however old I was
young,
and I'm from Sudbury, right? So we have Toronto with 3,000, Ottawa with 1,000, Mississauga with 700, Brampton with 500, Hamilton, all these huge departments, right, with big locals.
Yeah.
And I said, what are you fucking talking about, man? That's what. He's like, no, you're gonna be great. You're gonna be great. And I said, okay, well, let me process this. 2 minutes later, the International Association of Firefighters rep for Ontario and Manitoba calls and says, you got to do this. This is you got to do this. And I said, I don't. This is a job, man. This is a big job.
Yeah, steep.
And he's like, you got it. It's not a big deal. It's not trying to downplay, trying to sell, right? Trying to downplay.
Yeah, they're trying to sell you the position for sure.
Yeah, and at the time I had 2 brand new kids. My youngest might have been maybe 2 or 3 years old, and my oldest might have been 6.
It never happens when you're not that busy, eh?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So he says, oh, you might be away from home a couple times a week, and that's about it, right? So at the time, talked about it with, now my ex-wife, talked about it with my wife. It was, at the time, we're just like, well, might as well at least give it a shot, right? Nice. So ended up becoming, I think it was like the first person in 42 years to ever go from like just a local president to the provincial president. And the provincial president in Canada runs the largest firefighter union in Canada. Sorry, the Ontario is the largest firefighter union in Canada. Yeah. It's bigger than every other province
BC,
combined.
Quebec.
Everybody,
that's crazy,
right? And then it's the 6th largest in North America. So you're you're right up there with like California, Ohio, all these different places. New York State and everything else.
What?
So roll into that in the summer of 2016, and basically had a pretty wild ride with managing the fraud case and managing the criminal side of that. We pushed forward issues on certification and professionalism through NFPA, with NFPA through the Ministry of Correctional Services, Community Service, Correctional Services, pushed through legislative change for the first time in 25 years in the Ambulance Act, allowing a program for firefighters that are paramedics to be able to provide services on the back of a fire truck. That alone
That's huge.
It was huge, and it was huge opposition to that.
So, really?
Oh, yeah. So if you ever want to Google my name and send paramedics,
send
paramedics was like an internet lobby group that was diametrically opposed to what we were trying to do, right? So yeah, it was a big thing. Like I did debates on global news about this and the whole 9 yards, right? So it was a trip, and then it got to the point where it just became too much and stepped down, and decided not to run again in 2020. So it came out in 2020, and then I've been back here since. So, but then got into a whole other realm of government lobbying and stuff like that. So
epic, man. So what I'm curious about, just doesn't stop, eh? Man, there's the big thing I'm curious about, Rob, when it comes to that stuff that I've having researched, done my due diligence, talking to people, and about you and reading through kind of what you've done, and done like my bit of research here and there, and just hearing from what you've had to say just now, there seems to be, whenever big things happen and each group of people needs a spokesperson, right? Yeah. And they have those representatives and stuff like that to bring to whatever tables or levels of government you need to get, action taken. My question for you is there a strategy that's used? Like, how do you go about navigating so that it seems like there's the victims, the council, and then the people responding, like everybody gets heard instead of just everybody looking to point a finger? How do you navigate that? Like, so you're not just like on one side or picking sides. It's like, hey, I'm representing this group, and I'm not agreeing with the victims. I'm not disagreeing with them. I'm not against this or for that. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here and stating whether you're wrong or not. Yeah. But how do you go about navigating that? Like, is it a strategy? Is it like on the whim? Is it like everything you've seen? Like, it's been seen before?
It's pretty fluid based on the file, right? So based on the file. So for example, one of the issues was the paramedic on a fire truck thing, right? Mm-hmm. Had to evolve that from a previous strategy. And we looked at it from like a delivery perspective, what's good for the public, financial, and then did a light test against what the status quo was, right? And and paramedicine and pre-hospital care in Ontario, it's audited by the Auditor General. Mm. So you have an opportunity to see what the effectiveness is based on the costs, right? So you're able to utilize those things and pick a strategy to navigate that to make financial sense.
So you do have the cost versus analysis.
Yeah, so we actually did a financial forecast model with like PricewaterhouseCoopers, so that you could actually each municipality can punch in their numbers and they can make a determination
perfect.
on whether or not it was cost effective or not.
Right.
Because what cost effective in Sudbury is not cost effective in Toronto.
Very
right?
different.
So you have to look at it case by case.
Makes
and then
sense,
you also have single tier municipalities versus upper tier municipalities, which is whether or not you have a region, right? And without amalgamation in Ontario, we had Ottawa, Sudbury, Hamilton that were single tier municipalities.
Right.
Responsible for their own delivery, and then the province would pay this stuff.
I see. Okay.
In Vaughan, when you have York region, or in Oshawa and you have Durham region, then you have an extra layer of bureaucracy and things that you have to go through.
Right.
And there's no type of empire building like emergency service empire building, right? Like each silo has its own gig, and there's only so much money in the pie, and you have to navigate that. And then it became an issue of like, what makes sense, right? So if I have a paramedic that's qualified sitting on the back of my fire truck as a firefighter, and we arrive first on the scene, that individual is not allowed to perform their skill sets that they've been trained to based on the legislation.
Despite having all the requirement,
Correct.
Like all the equipment required with you guys
right?
as well.
So you have a situation where you have like one of our firefighters, and we have lots of guys that have done the paramedic training, but one in particular was a critical care flight medic.
Oh, so it's
on Orange, on the air ambulance.
Yeah.
So
they're good.
He can do basically anything on the ambulance.
Yeah, he's doing surgery.
But then when he comes onto the fire truck, he's very limited, right? So
and not lack of equipment.
Well, there's for the most part, like
what
for
he's allowed to do.
It's not so much the equipment as it would be the meds, right? Because we're not allowed to carry meds and stuff like that. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So and it's all starting to evolve now, and one of the big things that I think is opening up some. I think I personally believe we were too early, right? Yeah. So when we did this, it was just before the election in 2018 when Kathleen Wynne lost and Premier Ford came on, and it was just too soon, right? Right. And I think COVID and fentanyl, the opioid crisis, I think are having people look at that, because during COVID down in Toronto, you had people waiting for 2 hours on the side of the road waiting for a transport unit to get them to the hospital. But the fire crew's sitting there and you can't just leave them. They can't do anything. Because it's patient abandonment, right? So you have this situation where we lobbied to allow them to use the skill set. We lobbied for what we call treat and release, which is basically you cut your arm, I'm going to put a Band-Aid on you. I don't need to transport you to the hospital. You're good to go. Right. Or treat and refer. Look at you, okay, there's a clinic over there, you can go over there. Oh, cool. Okay. So all these things pass legislation.
There are solutions then.
Yeah, and the paramedics have been using them very successfully lately, but nobody has taken on the EMCA certified firefighter paramedic pilot project yet. Right. Because at the time, it was in the emergency service world, it was like chaos, right? Like fire chiefs arguing unions and paramedics arguing firefighters and unions arguing unions, and it was a lot because it was everybody thinks it's gonna be a big shift over to this fire is gonna take over. It's impossible. Yeah, like it's not
too much change.
Too much change. And the fire service is 200 years of tradition, never impeded by progress. You know what I mean? Right. So, but now we're in a situation where 2017, I think it was 2016, 2017, when we had Narcan put on the trucks. So we lobbied the government and with our partners and the other stakeholder groups in fire to have Narcan put on the truck. Amazing. Before 2017, we had no Narcan. And we'd go to fentanyl calls.
And you just sit there and be like, you can't do anything.
You basically give oxygen, do your vitals, but there's nothing you can do, right?
Just like preliminary assessment.
Yeah, for the most part, right? So it's like, it's kind of silly, right? Yeah. So now, it'll start to evolve because I think for the most part, the public is going to demand even more like service for dollars, right? And if you're there already anyway, and you have the ability to make a difference, you know,
yeah, why not?
What's wrong with an EpiPen, or what's wrong?
Yeah, what's stopping?
You know, so these are the things that the groups have to wrestle with.
Yeah.
Where you go down to South Texas, the guy can do a tracheotomy on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not joking, but at the time it was fun, and it worked out. It worked out well. It was the first time it ever been the act had ever been changed in 25 years, and it was us that did it. So, you know, we made some. Yeah, we had some opponents, but like whatever. For us, it was like check. You know,
you can't make everybody happy when it comes to doing stuff you're doing.
No.
Nobody likes change, especially in this region.
Yeah,
we'll call it, or especially with stuff like services that have such hardcore, deep traditions, right?
Exactly, and it's, you know, I think everybody in that, on that particular file, it was like a personal reaction, right? Like
which
an
is
emotional,
hard,
personal reaction, and it's like, no, we're not. Nobody's trying to take anybody's jobs here, guys.
Yeah,
just trying to help out the system. You know what I mean?
Which is kind of leads to my next thing I'm wondering about, especially when it comes to, because it's funny you mentioned the meme thing. In researching, there's certain things I don't care about certain things, but there's some things that I'm like, I want to like really understand, maybe potentially where both sides are coming from.
Yeah.
Well, both sides. There's like 4 sides in half the thing, right? So not just A or B. It's like A to Z. So I'm looking at it and I see like as many hate towards you and what the action is, and then as much for. But then I'm trying to understand the other side, and I'm like, you know, obviously there's a bit of bias, right? Because you're a friend of mine, but I don't want to like look at. I'm like, this doesn't seem like. Why is there a Facebook group dedicated against this guy? Like, what is he? I was like, I don't think it's that. Like, somebody spent so much time. But I was listening to something a while ago, and this woman, she mentioned how deciding in terms of political opinions and politicians and council and stuff like that, is we make our decisions a lot of the time based on emotions,
100%.
Based on feelings. And it's like, regardless, most politicians are, you know, at a high level of politicians, maybe not like our MPs and stuff like that, but they're more often not narcissists, right? Like, they have those tendencies. At the bare minimum, I'd say like a lot of them have tendencies. Now, you can agree or disagree with that, but that's kind of what I've seen. And hearing her point, and then go, you know, everybody seems to make these emotional decisions, and that seems to fight it, and like almost it fights against them more than it does for them.
Yeah,
right?
It's
weird to understand.
I don't know about the narcissism side of things, but I do know that their business is their brand, right? Politicians, their business is their brand, so they have to maintain a certain brand to be able to be successful in their business.
I like that way.
You know what I mean? So it's not because, you know, with the narcissist side of things, it's like that would be absence of caring about anybody but themselves. And I've worked with lots of politicians that are passionate, like Jamie West. You've had him on the show. I saw that. Like, great guy. Franz Jelena, our MPP from Nickel Belt. If there was one person I would ever go to war with, it would be France. She is amazing, and it's her. It's not about her. It's about you know, we had an issue here in Sudbury with a triple fatality and then a coroner's inquest that we ended up being able to get done 5 years after the fact. Had it not been for France, the people affected, the people that passed away, and the community as a whole wouldn't have had a voice, right? Like, so it's one of those things where, but it's but to your point on the emotion is what sells everything, right? When I put forward the financial side of things, nobody cared.
No.
Because the Ministry of Health Long-Term Care in the province of Ontario's budget is larger, at the time, than every other department's budget in the province of Ontario combined.
Crazy.
You know, like billions and billions and billions of dollars. So if I say I'm going to save you $100,000. Well, what's $100,000? It's a rounding error.
Yeah.
And in that, but if I say I'm going to save this person, by allowing my my firefighter on the back of the truck to be able to perform to their full skill set that they've been trained on, that's going to save somebody's life.
100%.
Right? Then it's like, that's what makes sense. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Yeah. So
it's easier to connect with people when they show that side of emotion, especially when it's used passionate. And I want to just circle back and mention quickly before I jump forward about the her example was Trump and Biden.
Oh, okay.
So that's why the narcissism was like,
like both sides
in that case,
in that
case. But so going back to this, he looking at how people can connect to passion and people connect to, like, I think, was it you've said this to me in the past, and I know other people have, but it was a while ago. It was like, you're the truth, right? Like, like truth coming forward and stuff like that. So understanding that when it's, I think where there's a disconnect is when people use their emotions to manipulate, right? And make other people feel a certain way, or like, hey, I want you to feel bad because I feel bad about this. It's like, now I'm playing victim, I'm playing sad, and everybody now needs to relate to me and understand what I'm going through, and if you don't agree with me, you're the problem, you're the villain.
Well, sure, that's cognitive behavior therapy, right? That's what they teach you, is like, your emotions are not my problem.
Right.
Your reaction or your feelings are not. I cannot make you feel a certain way.
It's crazy.
You may think I can, but the reality is I can't.
100%.
Right? So how you interpret and process what I say to you is on you, not on me.
Absolutely.
And that's what this whole, like, this notion of feelings and perception is reality. No, that's craziness. Feelings are fleeting.
Feelings aren't reality. Yeah.
That's right. So, but in turn, like, what's making it so much harder for people is like this constant, because the other half of this equation in terms of these strategic campaigns and how we were so successful is we launched like strategic micro-targeting campaigns, a la Victory Lab, Sasha Eisenberg, Obama 2000, campaign and stuff, utilizing social media and stuff, and nobody else in labor in this country was like, we used a platform called Nation Builder, and there's other ones, but those are campaign platforms, right? That's how you run a political campaign. We said we're going to take the strategy of a political campaign and put it into an issue.
Right.
So myself and another individual went down to a campaign tech conference in Washington, D.C.
Epic, yeah.
Only 2 union people in the room. Everybody else is running, gubernatorial campaigns, presidential campaigns, congressional campaigns. And then there's these 2 union thugs in the room like, what are you guys doing here?
Yeah.
Well, we're trying to learn, right? We're trying to see how you guys are doing this. And we took that process and we took those tools and those skill sets and put them into, let a firefighter paramedic on the back of the truck do their job. Put into their firefighters should be certified under the National Fire Protection Association's qualifications. So we took that and we utilized tools like new modes. So like provincial politicians were getting direct phone calls, direct emails from the public, right? And it's one of these things, like, if you look at 2 days ago, yesterday, whatever it was, Pierre Poilievre's op-ed in the National Post. He said, "Fire your lobbyists, go to the public." Right? 100%. And I'm not blue or red or
red,
orange.
Green, yellow, orange.
My mentor Henry Watson used to say, "I'm a political whore. I'll work with whoever to get what I need to get done for 100%. The person on the back step of the fire truck." Right? So you work with all parties to try to get done. Then we were successful in doing that. Right? I think it's gone to the point where it's almost in hyperdrive, where people are seeing this stuff and taking it for news or taking it for that's fact, and that's what's skewing a lot of these.
If you're not one, you must be the other.
Yeah, which is insane,
crazy.
Right? This is the problem with the political discourse in the West as a whole. Is like, if you don't agree with everything on the left, you must be right,
and you must be far one or the other.
Well, we don't have middle anymore. We don't even have degrees anymore. It's far left, far right.
We lost that.
We've lost that, right? And it's one of the like that's, and I think that's where that's where the anger is coming in, and I think that's where the disengagement is coming in, because a lot of people don't want to be called a Nazi because they don't agree with, whatever issue is happening on either side, right? You can be anti this but pro this, right, for whatever reason, right? Like if it's without getting into the politics of it, but I have 2 daughters. There's things on the left that I don't agree with,
right,
but there's things on the right I don't agree with, right? So I'm a centrist, right? We used to have those politicians that would be Dalton McGuinty was a great centrist for the most part. Not always, but he was a great centrist for the most part. You don't see that anymore. It's far left, far right, right? So,
man, it's freaking crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy to see how everything shifted and now people are in, and I do think it's derived from the making too many emotional decisions that create the divide.
Oh, 100%.
What we're doing, right?
It's 100%.
It's clear as day. And the tough thing that I look at, and I look at what the good and the bad is, and of both, and then there's things I understand, because it's like, if you don't like, well, certain people I love and care about might agree with this, but then other people might not agree with that. It's like, I'm like, just because I want to own a gun doesn't mean I disagree with everything somebody else says. It's like, no, you can see kind of every side to it, and I think, is it eccentric? Like you're in the middle of it, you're trying to find where that middle is, but depending on who you talk to, that middle it's like, well, no, you sound like you're more one way than the other. Well, let's try to find a way to navigate it a bit better. But the thing I'm curious about, and the way I'd like to look at it is, if we shift gears a bit and focus on kind of the mental health side of it and what you guys see and going through all this, I'm curious to know, before I forget about this question, is what's your favorite and then what is your least favorite shift you've ever had? Because that'll stepping stone to the next thing I want to ask you about.
like in terms of events, or in terms of
it can be however you want to.
Yeah, it's well, they're all based on high stress environments, but I'd say the most memorable positive shift that I have, the one that sticks out the most.
Right. Nice.
We had an apartment fire here in the downtown core, and somebody had thrown a Molotov cocktail in the front entrance of the building and caught the place on fire, and there was people trapped, and we had one individual who on the 3rd floor was trapped in his apartment, developmentally challenged individual, and we were able to basically, at the time we were limited. What we have now on our engines, which is our pumper truck, we have 4 firefighters. On our ladder aerial truck, we have 4 firefighters. But at the time, back then, we had 4 on our pumper engine, and then we had 1 on our ladders. So we're trying to effect a rescue with, at the time, and that initial, kind of like 6-7 minutes, with 5 people, right? With a fully involved structure fire, with people hanging out the window.
Come on,
right?
With
So
5 people.
Yeah, 2 trucks, right? So we were able, between the two trucks, we were able to get a ladder up, get up, and I'll never forget it. We had our captain who has his own responsibilities trying to figure this out, with two of our guys going in to put water on the fire, because the safest way to protect people is to put the fire out.
Makes sense, yeah.
But then we have this guy hanging out the window.
Come on.
And if he falls, he's going to die.
Yeah, 3 stories up, right?
Yeah, he's going to die, and he's, it's basically like a chimney, and it's coming out the window, so he's getting burnt and everything else. So myself and the captain were able to put the ladder up, and then the captain had to go and do his thing, and I'll never forget it. One of the police officers said, "I got it." And he's getting pumped with smoke. He's "I got it." Climbed up, basically, to the window. I climbed up to the window. The guy's like, "I got my dog in here." I said, "I'll get your dog in a second." Grabbed him. He didn't want to come. Grabbed him. Ended up getting him on the ladder, pulling him out, saving his life.
Amazing.
So that was great.
Yeah, awesome.
There's a couple calls that are, the highlight reels on the other side.
Yeah, you can go
And
not so happy.
Yeah, and when you deal with issues with occupational stress injuries and stuff, those are the ones that never go away.
Right.
They never, like, they're in your head for life, right? And three that stick out the most for me. One was a fentanyl overdose. She had come into town. She'd been living in a boarding house, and she'd basically had her vision board, and you could see the progression from, small town girl, and then her pictures started to slowly degrade because of the drugs, and so we get on scene. She's unresponsive. Got my guys are working, and I'm kind of looking for her health card. I'm looking, because at the time I was a captain, looking for a health card, and I was able to witness that degradation of her quality of life in real time on her wall.
What?
Right, and for a father of two girls, it's extra. It's extra.
It's a bit different.
Another time we had a young man decide that he was going to end his life over a result of a breakup with his girlfriend, and ended up hanging himself and having to deal with his family there, like, for quite some time. It's not good. And then my last one, that was Christmas. Was it Christmas Eve or Christmas Day? Baby died. And then my two girls are at home, right? And it's kind of one of those things where, then you go back to the fire hall, and you're making your Christmas dinner or whatever, and you're just sitting there, and everybody's just sitting there numb, because it's, guys and girls have kids at home, right? And it's like, kind of, those are the ones that, they don't leave you, right? They don't ever leave you. And now, with the opioid crisis in this country, and Sudbury having per capita year over year some of the highest rates of overdoses, it's a constant thing, right? It's like, and as young as 13, 15, 17 years old, right? So it's that constant cumulative exposure to trauma over and over and over again that police, fire, EMS, corrections are seeing, nursing are seeing on a daily basis. So it's tough. It's tough. Where my father was a firefighter. He retired in 2008 with 34 and a half years. Back in their time, it was smoke. There was no smoke alarms, and there was no seatbelts.
Right.
So car accidents, house fires. All the time. A lot of fatalities. But not like it's today. Like the men and women of these services are seeing things that people haven't seen ever because of what's happening with fentanyl and opioids and stuff like that, right? So it's tough. It's a tough goal.
I have a question before I want to jump to something about that. Is there one solution, or is it seems much more complex, but we've talked about this at your place in the past, and I'm curious what you can say about it, but if there's one solution, end all be all, like what's going.
Like, I try to think about it from all sides, and it's very to try to not put the bias into the paramedics and firefighters and police that are seeing this on a daily basis. I don't know what the definition of safe supply is. Like, I don't really understand that, because it's still a hard drug. But I'm not a mental health clinician.
Right.
I'm not a healthcare professional.
Right.
In that sense, but for me as a lay person, I don't understand that. Right. On the flip side, from a legal perspective and a criminality perspective, I don't really understand that either. Right. Because it's like, what, we're gonna lock these people up? I don't really understand that part.
Yeah, they didn't really do anything.
Right. Because it's not. What are you gonna do? It's tough.
Yeah.
Like, it's tough. Like, what. If we look at our own microcosm, we've had situations where a guy or girl back in the early 2000s hurt your shoulder.
Right.
break a leg, do whatever at the time, you get OxyContin.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Downward spiral as a result. It's not their fault. It's that was a productive, tax-paying member of society that, you know, you watch Dope Sick or anything else. You see what happens with that, right? And it's 100%. Like that person doesn't belong in prison.
Freaky.
Right? So it's like, you know, and I look at it and I think about it, and it's my own, you know, this is my own opinion. It's like, until the unfortunate thing, and it's like, and I think I said this to you guys before, like, the train has left the station.
Yeah.
On this issue.
Yeah.
Right? You're not putting the genie back in the bottle on this issue. So until somebody comes up with something that can be taken, that's, you know, cheaper, just as effective from a I guess you know, like a getting high perspective, and safer, like, that's the only thing that's gonna change it. And it's like, does society want to get into the drug production business to manage this? Because I really don't see any other recourse for this. Like, decriminalization, obviously the government of British Columbia said that doesn't work.
Doesn't work. To the matter that they're going back on it.
They're going back on it.
Which is crazy. Right? It's like, hey, we admitted we made a mistake.
Yeah.
Which rarely happens.
Yeah. And a good friend of mine's he's a fire captain in downtown Vancouver that covers East Hastings.
So he sees a couple things.
Couple
overdoses here and there.
It's like, how do you, and it's not slowing down. Right? And this has been happening. Like, we first saw fentanyl in, it's got to be 14, 15 years ago now, where people were stealing patches off palliative care or long-term care patients in old age homes, cutting them into strips and smoking them in pens.
Insane. Yeah.
And then it's like, done. You know, I'd one where driving down the road, hit his pen, dead. Right?
Stop.
Yeah. And it's like, how do you manage that? How do you manage that now that it's been in the ecosystem for coming on 15, 20 years now?
2020, I did a road trip out west, visit some family in Vancouver, Victoria, right, with like 4 friends. All hopped in a Toyota Sienna and made our way that way. Now, I had listened to an episode, and I've actually had him on the podcast in like the beginning days. This guy named Garth Mullins, who runs a podcast called Crackdown.
Okay. He
lives on East Hastings Street.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
He shows me his like opium and stuff on the show, like over a Zoom call. It was crazy. So he's showing me his kit and stuff, and anyways, we're listening to the show as we get closer, like, you know, from Banff to Vancouver, and we're listening to it, long drive, go through the whole series at that point, and I was like, guys, we gotta go down. And I have a video somewhere, and I remember going to downtown, like East Hastings, and going through the street, driving, obviously, like doors locked, whatever. Going down, and then me being me, wanting to get out and walk and just like really get as much of the experience out of it as I can,
right,
without participating. Right now, the biggest thing that I think shocked myself, and I also know shocked the other 4 guys in the car with me, were the volume. Yeah. To your point, the volume of it, and for you to say it's not slowing down, that was 4 years ago.
I know,
man. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Because it was the sheer volume. I was like, man, the whole entire, what is that, like 1,500 meter long street?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah,
mile long?
That, yeah.
And everybody, shoulder to shoulder. Man, you'd think it was Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like, where's the festival happening? It's like, no, there isn't.
No, and it's every day.
Dude, it's so bad.
You know, police, fire, EMS out there every single day. Just
busy.
So the cumulative exposure to that for first responders in that city, in that small area, concentrated area. How long does it take for somebody to crack? 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, you know, and that's just that issue. They're still dealing with car accidents. They're still dealing with house fires. They're still dealing with everything else that they're dealing with. The police are still dealing with domestics. They're still dealing with, you know, violent crimes, everything else. Like,
everything shot.
Yeah. And it's like, how do you manage that and then go home and decompress
right away.
To revive yourself to go back the next shift. It's one of these things where you're basically, your nails are on the edge of a cliff right now, right? So when we see what's happening in our province with workers' compensation claims for occupational stress injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder, and disorder is a bit of a misnomer. It's an injury. This is, for the most part, this is an injury. It's not a disorder. This is what's happened to this individual as a result of performing their duties.
They were born with.
Yeah, which is why we were successful in, along with our stakeholders in police and EMS and corrections back in 2016, and having the government recognize PTSD as an occupational illness. Right. So we have cancers in our job, and heart diseases in our job that the government and WSIB it's presumed to be as a result of your job, right? Colorectal cancer, brain cancer, lung cancer, all these different cancers, and now post-traumatic stress.
That's crazy.
And the claims, if you look at the claims that as a result, they're not slowing down. And this is the problem, is that there's at some point going to be a tipping point, because employers, cities, have to pay those premiums or have to pay those claims and everything else, and it's not slowing down. I think last year, whatever it was, City of Toronto had I think it was like $45 or $50 million extra to their budget just to manage that claim, just for the City of Toronto.
Wow.
Right? So you factor that into 442 municipalities in the province of Ontario.
Ontario.
What are those numbers, right? So
it's extreme.
It's extreme.
Man, I would, if you went and you ran for mayor, I'd vote for you.
You would you?
Yeah, man. It's been a minute since I voted mayor, but I'd vote local. I'd vote for you. I'd write you in if you didn't.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that municipal politics is the hardest of all levels.
Really?
Yeah, because you're dealing with things that people see on a day-to-day basis.
Right, which never ending,
right? And kudos to every city councillor and mayor that decides to put their name forward, because I can't imagine the level of commitment and what they have to do to be able to manage that effectively. And and each city is different. I've had the pleasure of, through my old job as the OPFFA president, working with municipal leaders all over Ontario, and there's some really good people, and things are not getting easier to manage. Right, municipal budgets are not getting easier to manage, and they're getting pulled in 100 different directions. Where provincial, you get a file, you're a parliamentary assistant, or you're you're an assistant to the minister, and your files are like, the file itself is big, but you don't have 100 different files. You don't need to be a jack of all trades on everything. And then federally, kind of, again, you've got more insulation, more bureaucrats to kind of manage it. But municipal politics is, you are boots on the ground, man. Boots on the ground. Right on. For very little compensation, comparative to the amount of work that they have to do.
Fair enough. Yeah, so not any point soon.
No.
All right. Damn it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, that answers that. So, what I'm curious about, man, looking back kind of on what we were just talking about before, my whole pitching you doing there, you just telling me why you're not going to do it. Fair. Don't blame you. Still write you. Yeah. That's a me thing, not a you thing. I'll worry about that later. So what I'm curious about now is, how do you, in regards to the subject of mental health, how do you go about both personally dealing with your own and managing your own? Because like you said, minutes ago, deal with you first, number one first, right? 100%. Because then, family, girlfriend, wife, kids, everybody, they see you on or off shift. So you need to be, there. So I'm wondering, what do you do? Take care of yourself personally, and then afterward, is there any systems or strategies or things that are implemented for the first responders?
Yeah. So me personally, I did a lot of things wrong leading up to starting to do things
Yeah.
right. When I was 25-ish, had a bad scenario at work, with with a PTSD issue.
Right.
And at the time, there wasn't the conversation that there is about it today, right? So went and saw a doctor, and the doctor's response was, "Go take a vacation, and if you still feel the same way when you get back, come and see me." So I ended up going to Australia for a couple months, and left work and did all these, and this is before marriage, before kids,
Yeah, you're
before
saying
all
like
those
early
things.
20s.
Right. So I did that and landed in Sydney, Australia. Made some friends from Ireland, England. Bought a van, drove the coast, surfed every day.
Hell yeah, of course.
You know, and got to the Great Barrier Reef and came back and had an amazing adventure, and came home and figured, oh, freaking good to go now, right? Feel great. Nothing was fixed, and then kept going, went back to work and kept going to calls, kept, and then it just slowly starts closing in, and then got into the union world, which was another escape, because at the height of my job, I was gone 220 days a year out of 365, right? I'd be all over North America. I've been from Alaska to Florida and everywhere in between. Sick. There's nowhere I haven't been. But then the stresses of home and kids and everything else, and calls and fraud cases and all of these things,
Overwhelming.
got to the point where it became too much, and all of these maladaptive behaviors, mechanisms, and everything else, whether it's this or whether it's like overworking or trying to manage the hypervigilance, and just got to a point where it just became too much. And that was one of the reasons why my marriage at the time ended, right? Because my wife at the time said, I can't deal anymore. Too much. Which, at the time, it's like,
understand.
What the fuck you talking about? Now it's like, you got to protect yourself first.
Makes sense. Right? Yeah, it makes a bit more sense.
And then it just went off a cliff, right? And got to a point where, you guys, hang out with you guys, go to the gym, do cold plunges, sauna stuff. Yeah. I went from walking around at 220, whatever the weight was, my normal weight, I was down to like 163 pounds.
Come on.
Done.
Bro, done. You dropped like 60 pounds.
60 pounds, right? And at the time, because of this whole notion of politicians are selling their brand, myself being a politician in that world, trying to sell that brand, it's like, oh, I'm doing keto and running marathons and doing all these things. And in reality, it's all stress related, to the point where people that I'll never forget for my entire life, friends and colleagues from all over Ontario, showed up at my door in the middle of nowhere Mark's Day and said, you need to get help, right?
Really?
You need to get help.
That's crazy.
And, friends and leaders in the IFF calling and saying, we got to send you down to this treatment center, Rob. You got to go. You're not gonna survive. Like, you got to do something. And
wow.
Like, Fred LeBlanc and Ed Kelly are like two people that stand out at the IFF, and all of my colleagues at the OPFFA, and then it was like, you got to do this because you have 2 little girls that rely on you now, right? So I ended up getting on a plane in October 20th of 2018 and getting flown down to Maryland to the IFF Center of Excellence Treatment Center for post-traumatic stress disorder. Wow. So I spent a month there, and it was great. Like, the doctors there and the clinicians there were great. And, it saved me to the point of being able to get a foothold before falling off the cliff, right? And then working with my own doctor here locally, not locally, she's in Barrie, Dr. Lori Gray, who love her to death. Shout out right now.
Nice.
She's
amazing.
One of the reasons I'm still here.
Oh, that's awesome.
Helping to get from, being stabilized to being to back to thriving, right? And that you don't flip a switch from being like on one end of the spectrum to the other, and even just getting from out of that treatment center to thriving took years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it took years, and having enough self-awareness to say, this union thing's got to be put aside, right? All of these things have to be put aside because they're not helping, right? You got to focus on what you're doing, got to focus on yourselves, got to focus on your daughters, and with a dissolution of a marriage, all of these things come with it, with selling a house and all, which are all stressors in themselves. Got to get rid of all that stuff and then focus moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a long time, and now it's at a point where I don't even recognize that person.
Really?
Right?
Yeah.
Like that person there to this person now, like you guys wouldn't even recognize. Wouldn't even know who this guy is over here. Not even the same.
Crazy.
Right? So in terms of managing that,
that's wild.
The thing, like in my own personal experience, you're never cured from it. But you get to manage it, right? You can manage it. You get the tools given to you, and you learn the strategies, and you implement them in a manner to keep you to a point where if you feel yourself starting to go, you implement your strategies, you bring yourself down, and then you're good. But it's still, like, you're still dealing with the cumulative exposure to the calls that you're going to, whether you're on an ambulance or a police, a cruiser or a fire truck, you're still dealing with that until the point where you're done, right? Yeah. When you retire. And then you still have to manage, because a lot of the guys my dad's age, whether they'll admit it or not, like, they're still dealing with
and you can tell.
Issues. You can tell, 100%. You see somebody sitting on a kitchen table at work eating their lunch and they're sweating. Well, that's your central nervous system is
beating you up,
right? So your physiological response is trying to tell you something that your psychological response is ignoring. Yeah. Right. And we were fortunate enough. We did a project. A few of the people that I work with in this mental health sphere on developing technologies to be able to have the physiological response through technology tell you before your conscious comes in, right? So
it warns you of signs and stuff.
Cool. Using heart rate variability and other factors. Yeah, so it's kind of one of those things, and there's a great team of people that I work with out west, Matty Johnson, Gus Mariquin, and all these guys that are leaders in the field and clinical psychiatrists, and that's kind of where, in my opinion, things need to shift, is because this is a stoic culture.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it's police, fire, EMS, corrections, military, they're not telling you there's something wrong.
No.
Until there's no other option other than to say there's something wrong.
Yeah.
But whether it's stigma or whatever the issue is, they're not going to tell you.
Right.
Until if they're saying there's something wrong, they've already redlined to the max. Mm-hmm. Right? So hopefully is to keep them into that green or yellow before they even get to that red, with strategies and tactics to be able to keep that down. But it's tough. It's a tough thing, because you've been around enough firefighters to know that, like, they're never going to tell you. They won't.
Oh, no.
Won't even tell you that they're hurt.
No.
They won't tell you that cold plunge sucks, right?
Yeah.
Like,
they'll make jokes to get around it, and I'm like, bro, be honest. Like, this is miserable. I hate it.
Yeah, dark humor in emergency services is
required.
It's required, right? So, yeah.
Oh, amazing. So there's topic of conversation I've been kind of working around with some friends of mine and stuff like that, and then yesterday on the show, then today I want to bring it up with you. So there's something, I'm a big fan of actionables, right? And like tactics and things that you can use to, like, just as simple as it is. I have a problem. What's my solution, right? Like you said, it took years, right? Which length of time for solution, as long as we're working towards it, right? Awesome. But what I want to know is, where does empathy and understanding as a tool to help people get through their mental health struggles and at least put them in the right direction to have the habits that can manage it properly, right?
Right.
My thing is, so I'm not going to pretend to understand what you've been through I don't want to disrespect you by pretending because I don't.
Right.
But I'm wondering, at what point is it on you to, okay, now, like, where's the tipping point of empathy and understanding? Like, we can sit there and I can, like, say, oh, like, man, like, I understand man, that's tough. It's bad. Like, all the sympathy, empathy, understanding for you in the world. But at what point is it okay now it's okay for me to say and for you to do, well, now I need to start plunging more. Now Ice Path just brought it up, right? So it's like, when do I start making those strategies? When do I start going to talk to these people? When do I start getting involved in those communities of people that are striving for the solution or working towards? Like, where is it? Like, do they need that where, you have 2 young girls at home?
Yeah.
So do they need that to dig to help them push forward? Or where, I'm trying to understand the, like, actionable versus the empathy and understanding. Like, when is it, okay, we've done as much understanding as we can, now we're past that point, and I'm trying to understand that.
Right. And I think the reality is, that's a personal decision of the individual, right? And as it relates to the notion of someone else providing that empathy and sympathy and compassion, that's a double-edged sword, because compassion fatigue is a real thing.
100%.
Right? And if you're constantly, and this is a tactical error that lots of us do, is come home and you unload on your partner.
Yeah.
Or you come home and you don't ever unload on your partner. Right? And it builds and it builds. And a lot of the thinking, and this is, having the lived experience of, my father worked in the fire service for 35 years. My mother worked in the police service for 30 years.
Epic.
Right? Those are 2 stoic individuals. Right? So they're not, like, my dad would, for the most part, wouldn't come home and tell my mom his stories, because he doesn't want to dump that on her, and then my mom doesn't want to dump it on us and on him, and it's just like,
they just hold on to
it, right? Because at the time, that's what they're trained to do.
For sure.
Where I think the positive intermediary step is culturally competent and culturally aware clinicians, right? British Columbia, the firefighters in British Columbia, led by Matt and Gus and a good friend of mine, Gord Ditchburn and Steve Farina, they built a system where they would train mental health clinicians on what it meant to be a firefighter, what that would look like, what that culture looks like.
That's huge.
So that they would understand. So you weren't just talking to somebody that knows that there's a red fire truck down the street.
They should have a PhD.
They know what it is to be a firefighter. So they created a whole network of culturally competent clinicians, right?
Whoa!
So that there, where at least if the men and women of these services are going to talk to a mental health clinician that actually knows what you're talking about,
man, that's fascinating.
It allows for that opportunity to get that out without that necessarily dumping it on.
There's less of a disconnect.
Correct, right? Wow. So, and they've been very successful in BC and Alberta and now in the eastern provinces at getting that out, right? And in terms of the men and women in the emergency services, they can go to a website and look up their city and look who's culturally competent.
Amazing.
Right? So they can go and pick the people that they know that they're going to be able to talk to about issues that are important to them because they know that they've done this training. So I think that's a really good first step to try to minimize the launch of information to your spouse or to your kids or to your friends or whatever, because, everybody asks you, what's the worst thing you ever saw? You don't want to hear the worst thing I ever saw.
No, God, no.
You know what I mean? And it's like, you don't, and I know that you don't want to hear it.
Because I don't want you to have, I wish you wouldn't have seen that.
Right, exactly, right? Yeah. So it's kind of one of those things, right? So, so I think that's kind of the first step on it. But in terms of the personal responsibility to engage in the practices like that aren't maladaptive, right? Like that aren't harmful, because that's the other thing. There's a lot of connection between occupational stress injuries and co-occurring addiction issues, right? Like it's for sure,
100%,
right? And
if used poorly,
and that's the thing, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the mindset is like, I don't have freaking time to go see a psychiatrist right now or a psychologist right now.
50 things going on.
Just give me some benzos and I'll take it out. Like, give me some Klonopin or freaking whatever, and I'll figure it out. And then that drives its own issues. Right? So yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's I think too, the main thing has been seeing like a surplus of men going through that issue, and like you said, less stoic individuals making it more of an issue and opting to play victim because they might not be in your situation where they're fortunate enough to have two kids or children that are like, there's something greater than me to live, right? So family and stuff like that. So looking at that and seeing kind of what men are doing and how men are kind of becoming, we talked a bit about this in the past, and stuff like that, and just seeing, like, even with like the movie The Wolf, you recommended to me, and stuff like that, just seeing how it's becoming. And I like, do you follow Tim Kennedy? Like, do you know who he is?
I don't. No.
I'll send you one of it. It's everything's extreme, but in like his personality is not what he's referring to and stuff like that. But yeah, you get a kick out of him. Big gun guy, like fighter, special ops, all that stuff, right? Good fun stuff. But he has a thing called sheepdog. Like, his philosophy is like there's 3 types of people, where there's wolves, which are like evil people. Yeah. There's sheep, which are like, women, children that require protection. Sure. Of themselves, whatever. And then sheepdogs, which same DNA makeup as the wolf, but they like blood in the sheep.
American Sniper. This is American Sniper.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. Right. So I find though, a lot of what would be years ago, sheepdogs are now becoming sheep. Or like now requiring more protection from external sources. They're not able to protect for themselves, let alone protect for other people. So I'm curious, and I've asked people, a couple guests in the past, who I thought would be good to answer this, and I'd like to put you in that category and see. I'm going to change the question up a bit. So, because I had them answer 3 skills I think men should learn as early as possible to develop. It could be help them with the mental health aspect and just life in general, right? To be able to not unload on people and stuff like that, and just live a positive, healthy life and all that fun stuff. So I would say 3 skills, but I want to do 3 hard skills and 3 soft skills, right? So 3 interpersonal skills and then 3 skills that are like, change a tire or learn to fight, like stuff like that. So, I'm curious to develop as early as possible 3 soft and 3 hard skills that I think, curious.
I think in terms of the whole like psychological interpersonal thing, listening is the ability to listen and actively listen. I think is key, especially in today's world, and I'm guilty of that's something I constantly work on, right? Mm-hmm. But to sit in front of somebody, engage eye contact, and actually listen to what they're saying, I think is something that people really need to learn. As it relates to other ones, protective compassion, right? Like showing empathy, showing compassion while protecting yourself, not getting enmeshed is a huge thing for understanding what the other person's saying, but not letting their emotions flood onto you, and to have that transfer on, I think is big, right? Like that's, and I see that a lot right now with like everything that's going on in the world is like, I'm going to dump all my stuff on you, and
your problems are mine,
right? And that's enmeshment, right? And we're not, that's more from the family side of things, but that's that concept. And saying no. Yeah. Having the ability to say no, unapologetically say No.
Not having to explain yourself. No, I can't today because of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And to the individual that you're talking about, like that's doing the fighting and the special ops and all this stuff, and the transition from sheepdog to sheep. Be unapologetic about the sheepdog status. That is a blessing.
Yeah.
And that is an honor.
Yeah.
Right? And it's one of those things like, Ben Affleck in Boiler Room. Act as if, right? Act as if you're the vice president of the goddamn company.
Hell yeah.
Right? Don't be apologetic. And in today's world, the notion of, whatever they coin it on whatever particular day, like toxic masculinity or whatever, like you have nothing to apologize for.
Right.
Right? It's embedded into your DNA. You're not, societal change is not going to change this.
Yeah.
Like hundreds of thousands of years one way and 50 years the other way. Don't apologize. Be the sheepdog. Be respectful. Yes ma'am, no ma'am. Open the door. Do all these things, but be vicious when you need to be.
Oh hell yeah!
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Don't apologize for it, and I think that's where people need to really understand, like, this whole cycle of weak men create hard times create hard men create good times, right? Like, and it's like, that's okay, man.
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point, like, I'll use my Twitter or X obsession as an example. We're seeing all of these protests and this and that, and all over North America. And then all of a sudden, one of the most iconic pictures coming out of 2024 is 20 frat boys holding up the American flag at UNC.
Hell yeah.
And what is the overwhelming response? Thank God.
Yeah.
For these kids.
100%.
Right? They're
amazing.
They're not apologizing for it.
Oh no.
They're not. And there's other issues that are surrounding it, but it's like,
the fact of the matter is,
they stood up for something that they believed in, unapologetically. Right? And it's like, you can be yourself without having to cater to any or every special interest whim at any given time. Like, be yourself. Unapologetically be yourself. Don't be an asshole.
Right.
Don't be a dick. But if somebody else thinks you're being a dick for being yourself, whatever, man. That's your issue. That's not my issue. As long as you're a good person, like... Right,
your intention's huge.
Right? Yeah. At the end of the day, you call somebody an asshole, you call somebody an asshole. If they're going to get offended by that, well...
Yeah, it's their problem.
Whatever, man.
100%.
You know what I mean? And then hard skills, change the tire, 100%. Learn how to split wood. Like, my old house, I used to have to freaking cut 40 cords of wood every year, and it was like... When I first moved there, I'd be like, I feel like such a fucking idiot. I don't even know how to do this shit, right? Learn how to do that. And learn how to gut an animal.
That's on my list.
It's 100%.
This and next year.
Right? Learn how to field dress a deer. Learn how to field dress a moose. Learn how to field dress a bear. Because at the end of the day, if you do not know how to do that, and the shit hits the fan, where are you at? Right? It's like the whole gun thing that we were talking about. Yeah. You could not have any of these things and everything could be fine, but you could not have any of these things and things not be fine.
What's the saying, man? It's better to need it or have it and not need it than need it.
That's exactly
and not
right.
have it.
Right. And it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's fucking sick. Yeah. At the end of the day, oh my goodness, man. Oh, it's awesome. As one of like a last question to kind of round things out before we conclude. I saw this guy in this podcast I follow about like real estate investing. Very random.
Okay.
But he does this thing, and I want to kind of adopt it. But he does 3 books, 2 people, 1 quote. I'm gonna change that last one to like 1 lesson you've learned, whatever that, or piece of advice that might be worthwhile to somebody like you when you were in your late teens or 20s.
Right.
Do you? So 3 books, 2 people, 1 quote lesson.
So 3 books. First one would be Victory Lab by Sasha Eisenberg. The second one would be Train Spotting by Irvine Welsh. And the third one would be Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Nice. Let's go.
2 people. I would say Dr. Lori Gray,
Nice.
my psychologist, and Dr. Abby Morris, my clinical psychiatrist down in Maryland.
Amazing.
And one quote would be, to be yourself in a world that's constantly trying to change you is its greatest accomplishment, by Ralph Waldo Emerson, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Jeez. Every time I hear David Goggins, and I want to mention this to you, I think you'll love this, especially now that you like used him as one of your books. I was training for my marathon, right, and I have a buddy who's like diehard David Goggins fan,
Yeah.
at least at the time. And he's like pre-ordered his books before like David even mentioned he was having another. Anyways, I post on my Instagram story like it was like -20 and we ran like 15K. Yeah. Awesome, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, like David Goggins would be proud of you, bro. Like just like, hey man, like pat on the back. And like to him, Goggins replied to my story
With
and goes,
0 follower, or he follows 0 people in the entire
zero
world.
people. He replied and goes, "Stay hard, boys."
Nice.
And I was like, yes, let's go. I sent that to like 7 people who were all like diehard Goggins fans, and I was like, guys, you'll get a kick out of this because I wasn't one of those followers at the time, so I was like, this is hilarious.
Yeah,
So
I was
like,
never
grateful for it.
really too much into his stuff until his Can't Hurt Me book.
Yeah.
Like, it was, and just to hear the humans, because I read it and then I listened to the podcast, and the podcast, the audiobook,
right.
which is actually a podcast. He's being interviewed at the same time.
Oh wow.
And to hear that, especially his early days with his mom and his dad, and the roller rink and all that stuff, like there's a human side to that, right? And yeah, some of it's extreme, but again, he's unapologetically being himself, right? And I think if more people were like that in the world, like it would be a different place than it is right now. There's too much of this issue, and then I'm going to move on to this, like the serial protesters that are constantly going from one hot button issue to the next, or on both sides, right? And it's just like, it's just freaking be yourself in this world, and at the end of the day, try to be a good person as much as you can, and and Goggins is a prime example. As hardcore 100%. As he is, and as rough as he is, and kind of gruff around the edges or whatever, but just doing his thing, right?
We need it. Yeah. We need more of it, and couldn't agree more.
I wouldn't want a whole world of David Goggins. Can you imagine?
That'd be tough. Every day be, man, I'd be hurt. I know nothing can hurt me, but I'd be hurt.
No, it'd be too much. Too many Trevor Albanars doing punches all over this world. You never freaking get out of the place.
Man, every time I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know how he does it, but that's awesome. Shout out to him for sure.
Yeah, and you know what the thing is, Glenn?
Awesome.
Like it's
awesome.
One of these things that, like, you guys, when I met you guys for the first time, it was before you even knew that I met you. Like when you guys started the 5 Cent City, when I went and spoke at it.
Yeah.
And then when we started doing the cold plunges. And
that's like, where I first met you.
Yeah. But it's like, you see your group of friends, like you, Zach, Patty, Christian, all these guys, like 5 Cent City is a prime example, man.
100%.
You see a problem, we're going to fix it.
Hell yeah.
And we're going to be unapologetic about it, right? And like Mike and everybody, and it's just like,
everyone.
So many people are talking about changing the world, and then this group of friends in Sudbury, Ontario says, no, we're going to fucking change the world. And it's
we're going to do that.
We're going to do that. And we're not going to alter our principles. We're not going to do anything other than what we want to do and what's fun and raise awareness. And that 5 Cent City was one, like, to this day is still one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So awesome. Kudos to you guys, man, because it's wild, man. It's for sure.
I'm so grateful for that opportunity. I wouldn't have met you because of it. I wouldn't have, I just doing the show. It was like steamrolled into that, like meeting Pat, to meeting Zach, to going to 5 Cent City, to meeting Michael, to like now going there a second year and being kind of a bit more involved, and then the third year last year, and then being like, meeting Trevor through Pat, and meet like all these guys. And I'm like, what? Like it's crazy to me to look at and to see where like the potential of what there is to become is, like, even just getting glimpses of it and like hearing from what you guys have gone through and being able to learn from you guys as a byproduct of doing that and kind of, in my mind, being unapologetically myself.
Yeah.
And understanding what people are going through and trying my absolute best to learn from guys like you and stuff like you've been through, just to help me, and being grateful that you're able to take the time to even just give me the time of day to sit down on your day off and tell me about things you've gone through, and helped me get a greater understanding of things that I'm interested in.
Right on.
So Rob, I'm super grateful for this conversation, the ones we've had in the past and the ones we'll have in the future. So
absolutely, man. Thank you again for having me here. It's been great.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Where can people connect with you? Where can people find you? Which is the preferred way to reach out and stuff?
I've been actually trying to get off social media as much as possible, but you can always find me on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. I've been trying to remove myself from that a little bit, but for the most part, people can find me wherever. They can go to the local fire hall and try to find me there for the most.
Knock on the door.
Yeah.